Greetings, human beings, and welcome back to Apartment 303, a podcast for community fans. My name is Dave, and alongside my co-host Adam, we are here to discuss all things community, each and every layer of the show, and why we love it so much. On today's episode, we are going to be digging into the legend of all 5 dances. What are they? What counts as a dance? Are there only 5? All of this and more we're going to be hashing out. But before we get into it straight away, Adam, I've got to know, man, how have you been? Where have you been? What have you been up to, my friend?
Yeah, so this is actually a very special episode. I am actually back in Seattle, and that's where I had started when we were originally starting the podcast, that's where I was doing all of my recording. So it's the first time we've recorded partially in Seattle since October of last year. So that's kind of interesting. And along the way, I actually met up with our former co-host Scott in Portland, met some of his good friends in the running community, and they are really wonderful people. So I'm happy that Scott has landed back there. I have been to the Redwoods National Forest. I can't remember if I had been to Yosemite or not as of our last podcast, so I've been there as well. So keeping things pretty Pacific Northwest these days.
So it's weird for me to be sitting down to do a podcast episode with you that does not involve a bracket. I want to start right there. We definitely committed to that, and I think hashed out every inch of that approach that we could over the last 3 months. It was a great time. And throughout the course of that process, kind of had this idea in my mind, like, when this is all over, we're going to do something lighter to follow up with in the following month. Do something easy. We've done all these sports, we've done all this tournament. Let's, finish the school year off with some dances and just have a nice clean layup here. We actually sat down to get into all 5 dances, and it first crossed my mind because, Adam, I know you've mentioned on the show your Nalgene with all your awesome community stickers, of which one is the all 5 dances, and everyone who loves community, or who doesn't for that matter, can go on the internet, buy an all 5 dances shirt. This joke stems from the end of season 1, where Dean Pelton mentions you get a shirt if you go to all 5 dances. And without giving it a whole lot of extra thought, I just assumed there were 5 dances in season 1, and probably in every school year at Greendale.
It feels like it, doesn't it?
It feels like there's a dance, or something dance-like in almost every episode. And if you sit down and rewatch season 1, that's not entirely wrong, but we're going to get to that. So really the issue became much deeper and more complicated than I had originally thought off the top of my head. But talking about it has been a lot of fun. I'm really excited to hash it out in more detail with you today, Adam. So we've got to start somewhere. Let's start with, when I presented this to you, what were some of the things that first crossed your mind? Like, what would you consider a dance?
It's a great question. And anyone who Googles in, or whatever search you use, Bing if you're a tool, I guess, I don't know, you would search for all 5 dances community and just to, kind of get the ball rolling. And there's a Reddit thread in there, but it's interesting because it's really inconclusive. And it kind of comes down to people's opinions, right? Because as you've mentioned, like, it feels like there's a lot of dances in season 1 in particular. It feels that way, but we kind of, in preparing for this episode, I kind of tried to codify what that actually meant. So, a simple, before I get into the rigorous list that we've put together here, one simple thing is there is dancing and music. It seems like those are critical elements for a dance. And as clear cut as it seems like that actually kind of muddies the water, because there are a lot of places, or a lot of times, where there is music, certainly, maybe less so of actual physical dancing. But it was just kind of interesting to start to pull at this thread, because like you said, it seems obvious, but the more we dug into it, the more we found like it was connected to that. And I've got a list of other things here in a moment that I would submit as a pretty good rubric for determining whether or not something is a dance.
Well, I'm glad you started with those too, and I think it serves to underscore the point that Okay, so you've got those two things. Well, with those criteria alone, that narrows it down to about 14 episodes /
Right.
events in season 1. So even starting with those two, it really leaves a lot of room for debate. Do you want to throw out some other ones here and see if we can perhaps narrow it down a little bit?
Yeah, I think we can do that. One of the things, I generally will take my cues from lines of dialogue. So even though these weren't necessarily in season 1, Shirley says in season 5, episode 6, she says, "Oh, you just put some food on the table, lower the lights, and that's a dance." With it being Greendale, it's a pretty low bar to clear. But like I mentioned, music, generally speaking, also dancing, of course. Jeff says in the same episode, Analysis of Quark-Based Networking, it needs a visual theme. And then he says something else a little bit later. I guess it could use a little something theme-wise. Oh, I'm sorry. So Jeff says, I guess it could use something theme-wise. Annie, when she's trying to get people to work on a committee separate from hers, says that it needs a visual theme.
Like Bear Down for Midterms, for example.
Yeah, or Fat Dog, whichever is less offensive.
Whichever
at the
is
time.
more appropriate.
I'm not even going to say more appropriate, less inappropriate. So that's another thing. A theme is something we're definitely looking for. Music, like I said, and again, in that episode, there's More Than This was one of the songs that plays in the Sophie B. Hawkins dance. Damn, I wish I were your lover plays. So those are two, quick examples just off the top of my head. The dean mentioned, speaking of History of Dance, he says, well, I've already started a Sadie Hawkins banner, so I guess this thing is pretty much set in stone. So there's a level of decoration as well. So theme plus decoration, that's something that's, important or critical to make it an official dance. One other thing here, and this one's not set in stone, but at the Sadie Hawkins dance, one of the lines is, "You're free to go to the Sadie Hawkins dance, which will be happening across the cafeteria. Our school has limited venue options." So if it happens in the cafeteria, that's a pretty good indicator with those other criteria that you're talking about a dance. Not guaranteed, because there's one season 1 episode that I would consider a dance that does not take place in the cafeteria because it hits some of those other criteria.
And to build on your cafeteria point, I think what you're getting at speaks to a little bit of a larger point, which is what I identified as, is it obviously school sanctioned? And I think the cafeteria is a big indicator of that. There may be perhaps other places in the school where dance-like activities are officially sanctioned we may have to address. But I definitely think you're on to something there. So
just to kind of recap before we move on, sorry, we're talking visual theme, decorations, music, and if it's officially school sanctioned on Greendale's campus, particularly in the cafeteria.
You said dancing, right?
I did say dancing.
Okay.
I mentioned the bisque.
Did you mention, bonus points, did you mention the stage?
I did not mention the stage. So yeah, go ahead and segue over here.
I don't have a whole lot to say about it, but that was something else that I had put on my list as I was going through and rewatching that could potentially be a differentiator. At least in my recollection, I know everyone's upbringing was different. Every dance I ever attended to had a stage, but of course, I've also attended many events that weren't dances that had stages. So I put that one on the list as something that we should consider as we're going through these. So it seems like we've got a pretty decent starting place for some criteria. Let me ask you how you want to approach going forward here. Would you like to give me a list of what you think counts? Or do you want to kind of go through? Okay, all right.
I think so. I've got a list, and then maybe we can debate the merits of each one, because I think you and I have some slightly different perceptions and takes here based on the little that we have talked beforehand.
So this is a list of episodes that are close and need to be discussed, or this is your definitive list of what counts?
Oh, I don't have a definitive list. I came to air out my laundry on a podcast, man.
All right. What do you got?
I have A Night Under the Stars. I mentioned it just a moment ago. To me, that is a dance because it's on Greendale's campus.
Now that is, let me be clear, you're talking about episode 1 or episode 8 from season 1?
That's correct.
Where they have a picnic and sing along with No Worries, Vaughn's band?
Yep, Vaughn's band, No Worries. So they have a band. So
Definitely a stage. Go ahead.
There's dancing at the very end as he sings Pierce Your B. People are dancing and singing. And gosh, some of those extras really get into it. Take a look at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. And, I mean, you could convince me that the No Worries is an actual band.
It's definitely one of the episodes I always notice something different out of, and that's because it comes from watching the extras and the other actors' reactions and things of that nature, like you said.
Yes. So I consider A Night Under the Stars one of the dances that Greendale has in year one.
Would you consider it the first dance they have in year one, chronologically speaking?
I would have to double check.
The reason I ask specifically is because both on our Twitter and on other feedback I've seen across the internet, a lot of people seem to pinpoint episode 7 from season 1 as the beginning of the dances. That's Intro to Statistics, where you have the faculty party going on simultaneously with Annie's Halloween party.
So I think that's a perfect...
Obviously, I'm tipping my hand here, but that's usually the first one that is brought up when I've researched or when I've asked the dance question.
So that is a tricky one, and it's why I didn't have it listed first. I think I ordered these in my conviction that they were in fact dances.
No, that's fair. So that's what you're most convicted as a dance, or that is your...
It's in the top tier.
Okay.
It's in the top tier. So, yeah, the faculty party, again, it takes place in 2 separate spots. I mean, obviously, Annie's extra credit Dia de los Muertos party is going on in the library.
Well, these are 2 separate parties.
Exactly. So...
And in the dialogue of the show, both are repeatedly specifically referred to as parties.
Correct.
But they feel like dances, don't they?
They absolutely do feel like
dances. They really do. I don't know why.
They have the ethos of
I
dance.
would have named that episode when I first, off the top of my head, I did the same thing. I'm like, oh, well, you got to get Intro to Statistics in there. It wasn't until we actually started thinking about criteria and rewatching where I was like, wait a minute.
Right.
What is this?
So it kind of comes back to, am I using inductive or deductive reasoning here? So if I'm thinking deductively, and the dean tells me that there are 5 dances, I'm going to say that yes, this is one, and I can find evidence to support that point. There's music going on. I couldn't tell you what it is off the top of my head. There's a theme for sure, because you have to have a costume to get in here, Squirrel. And Jeff's obviously wearing his cowboy outfit, and Slater is dressed as Robin
Hood. Which we
Hood.
know he already owned because he couldn't have got it on such short notice.
That's correct. So, theme, music, the decorations, I don't specifically remember them, but I'm going to imagine that there was definitely some kind of decor going on there.
I can't imagine a party hosted by Annie Edison that was not decorated to the T.
Oh, so yeah, back in the study room.
Even her cookies were decorated, right?
Yes,
am I imagining this?
I was talking specifically about the faculty party, but you're 100% right about Annie's side.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right about the Annie of it all. But again, all of that to say, I think it counts based on the rubric that we have available. It checks all of those boxes because it's on campus. There is a theme. Music is playing.
So if you're working backwards and you're looking for 5, it fills.
I think so. And Annie has planned to do the Danza de los Muertos with Jeff, which Abed can't find because he doesn't know if it's listed under playlist or specific genre. I'm sorry, Batman can't find it. So that would check every box that we have for a dance at that side of it. I'm going to rule it a dance.
I'm glad you took this approach. I'm going to play the inductive advocate here, not only because you claimed the deductive side, but also because that's how I approached it on my own.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm gonna give you that for now, but we will probably come back to it when we're actually trying to make a cutoff. Because if I'm approaching it forward thinking, with somewhat of a restrictive mindset, not working backwards from, okay, there are 5 dances this year, I don't think it passes the test for me. But I will admit that is probably one of, if not the one, that is hardest to make a call on. So let's keep going down your list for now.
Yeah, and if you thought that one was iffy and wishy-washy, wait till this
Okay.
one. So I include the STD fair as a dance as well. Again, from the perspective, there were 5. I have to find them. The dean said there were 5. Where are they? I would include the STD fair. Pierce refers to it as Annie's Mixer, and we shouldn't always take what Pierce says as gospel because it's generally misinformed in some way or another. But again, visual theme is definitely there. It's decorated, and there's music there not only when Troy and Abed arm wrestle, but also just throughout the evening.
When
music
Abed's
is
waiting
playing.
for something more inspiring to play.
Yeah, he and even though he doesn't have a son, he does have the trucker hat, so that counts.
And it's school sanctioned. I mean,
School
from
sanctioned.
start to finish, right?
Very much so. One thing I forgot to mention in terms of the elements of the dance, in terms of a codified rubric, is something Troy says in Her Story of Dance. He says, planning a dance is hijinks city, population hijinks. So in terms of hijinks, I can't imagine a more hijinky experience than the STD fair.
Well,
So
it does end with them being told not to use condoms, so.
Right. And just that's another one of my favorite Troy lines when he tells Abed to hurry before people sex one another. That's just hysterical.
So that's episode 11, right?
Yeah.
Politics of Human Sexuality. And
That's correct.
again, I'm going to back you up one episode here because one that a lot of people mentioned in their first breath was the Green Week dance,
Yes.
which I don't think is ever specifically called a dance, but that does occur in the previous episode, episode 10, Environmental Science. Where do you weigh in on that?
So I'm glad that you brought that up because that tells me that my list is in no particular order whatsoever, because I definitely have that one. I think that one's a slam dunk for a dance. I think it definitely is. So you've got the rock band Green Day, of course, and they're not the real Green Day, just tear that Band-Aid off. The visual theme is there, and I just noticed on this most recent rewatch, at the beginning of the episode, the dean says, we're going to be in Viredale, and prints out 5,000 copies of the flyer. Starburns says, we're already called Greendale. The dean says to his assistant, we need to print out 5,000 more.
Trying to save the planet here.
Right. And I just assume that's where the punchline ends. But if you actually look at the end when Green Day is performing, there are dozens of reprinted posters that say Greendale on them. So just, gosh, the fact that the props people went through and did that and that attention to detail, I know I'm a broken record at this point because Community does that so well. But again, that's important here because I'm looking for a visual theme, and only by taking this approach would I have noticed that. And I've seen that episode 10 times and had not noticed that specific decoration before. So, for me, that one's a slam dunk. That's easy. Checks every one of those boxes.
It checks all those boxes, and that is one of the ones that I had in my counts as a dance category. The only thing that bothers me is they never actually call it a dance or refer to the name of the dance aspect. They always call it Green Week. Mm-hmm. They've got the stage. They've got the music. They're clearly having a dance, but it is never named, which I will get over because I do think that one counts. Yeah. I don't think it's as strong as 2 others we haven't gotten to yet, however. So what do you have next?
Okay. And sorry, just to double back on the STD fair, I'm considering a dance again, working, retconning this. I'm imagining you're not so convinced on that one.
I kind of have them in the same tier. You know how I like to tier things, unfortunately. Yeah. Blame the internet for my addiction to putting everything into tiered classes. But for me, I have 2 that are hands down. If you try to argue they're not dances, I will shout you down on the podcast. It's not a threat. That's just, how strongly I feel about it.
Sure.
The STD Fair and Green Week aren't in that tier. They're in a second tier where I think in spirit they're definitely count. You can nitpick them in ways you can't the top 2. Mm-hmm. But I put those side by side, and ultimately I side with counting them as dances.
Okay.
Even though it's not hard for me to, try to pick apart their case given the criteria.
Right.
But if we need 5, they're both in it's the closest top 5 there are, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I can go, or you can tell me what are your top two that are definitively
Well, one of
dances.
mine I don't see on your notes page, so
Okay. So
maybe
I guess
maybe you forgot to put it on there and it's still in your brain. I just
there's
kind
a
of
good
want to see
chance
how
of
it
that.
plays out here.
There's a good chance of that. I put the transfer formal, and yeah, that doesn't really roll off the tongue, so maybe we could just call it the trainee dance.
Sure.
And I think that's again with that's top tier for sure. It's literally called a dance, so independently of all of the other criteria, even though it does take place
It's literally
in
called dance, and it
yeah,
occurs in the same episode where the dean wears the shirt, says the line, really introduces the
yes,
concept of all 5 dances.
absolutely.
So for me, I definitely agree that the trainee dance, that's one of the two that I had in the class of, you can't argue this isn't a dance. Like,
Right.
this is, by every definition, it's the episode where they bring it up. It's specifically called a dance. It checks all the other boxes. But there is another episode that fits all those criteria except for
Oh,
obviously
I know
isn't
what it
the
is.
episode
Yeah.
where the shirt is. And that is Valentine's Day,
Yeah,
which
which
happens.
Chang calls back to. Yeah, I totally
Yeah,
spaced on
that's
that one.
episode 16, communication steps,
Yeah.
which it's kind of easy to forget that that's a dance episode because the dance is kind of an afterthought in that episode.
Yeah.
It doesn't really get mentioned. It's not really a meaningful part of the episode until the very, very end. It's almost like a tack on so that they can resolve the episode, right?
Right.
Whereas a lot of these other ones, I feel like, persist throughout the entire episode, even if it's just in kind of throwaway lines or throwaway jokes. But even though it doesn't appear in the whole episode, it's a dance. They call it a dance. Everyone
Yep.
gets, wears their best formal wear. There's a prom joke. Like, for me,
It walks like a dance. It quacks
yeah,
like
next
a dance. It must be a
next to the
dance.
training dance, I think
Yeah.
it has the most inscrutable case. This is a dance, despite its minimal appearance and minimal meaning on the overall episode and story that's being told there. I don't see how you can't count that one.
No, you're absolutely right.
So
Again,
for me,
just
I'm
furthering the
working
point.
backwards from Valentine's Day and the training dance.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So that leaves me with a list of 6 then, and I feel even better now that we definitely have 5, because I was a little wishy-washy on 1 or 2 of them, but I was trying to make the case. So I guess then maybe I'll give you a crack at my 5 in stone. Take it to the grave. These are the 5 dances.
You're printing them on the back of your shirt.
I would print them on the back of my shirt, yes. So, transfer formal, Valentine's dance, Green Week to me is solid as well. A Night Under the Stars, and then the faculty party, and / Dia de los Muertos party. Because again, that's an official one because Annie's getting extra credit for doing it. So even though it wasn't thought of, constructed by Dean Pelton, it is very much officially sanctioned. So that would leave the STD fair out. That's the one that I felt least good about anyway, but that's because I completely forgot to put down the Valentine's dance.
I agree with you most of the way down. With Valentine's, with Trainee Dance, I've established that I think there's a second tier there for 3 and 4. I'd put Green Week and the STD Fair, actually, as the strongest cases.
So Night Under the Stars, that's the one you don't feel good about.
That's my
Wow.
5. I would leave off Intro to Statistics because A Night Under the Stars to me feels more officially sanctioned. It feels more like a dance. There's cohesive music. There is a stage. 1-7 to me, Intro to Statistics really just feels like dueling parties. And maybe part of the reason is up to that point in the show, there hadn't been any dances, right? That wasn't a theme that they had been working with. So, retroactively, I think I understand why people want to kind of pigeonhole it in there. But, we've narrowed it down to 6 and we're picking a top 5. And for me, that's the one that falls off in 6th.
Okay, yeah, so run them back for me again just to make sure.
Yeah, Valentine's Day dance, Trinity dance, Green Week, STD fair, Night Under the Stars. So I leave off the faculty Halloween party / Dia de los Muertos party. Okay. Whereas it sounds like you're going to leave off Night Under the Stars the next episode.
Oh, no, I was taking off the STD fair. Night Under the Stars is definitely a dance for me. Oh,
great. That's why we recap. Okay, so you're leaving the STD fair off.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah. No, I feel better about that now that we've talked through it.
I wasn't sure we were going to be able to narrow it down to 6, honestly, much less 5. So I do feel better about that. Now, obviously, there's a lot to talk about beyond season 1. We're going to save that for another episode. I know we're not doing brackets right now, but before we get off the subject, I do want to ask you how these episodes stack up for you, not necessarily in terms of what we've been talking about so far, how strong their case is based on do they qualify as a dance. Now that we've established these episodes, how would you kind of stack them up against each other? Is there like a favorite or least favorite that you have out of this group? Ones that you enjoy more or less to watch?
One of the things in being so involved with season 1 on the last several podcasts that we've done, in the bracket, I had to know all 16 episodes pretty well from season 1. And then now doubling back and looking at the dance potential for all of the episodes. First of all, it just reminds me, gosh, how much I love season 1, how great the writing is, how much I love Britta's character in season 1. And that's just so refreshing because of how much she changes over the course of the series. And, that's one point that doesn't answer your question, but it's just something that I felt really compelled to say because, watching them pretty critically lately. So they're all really good episodes, if I'm being completely honest. I really like every one of these. Pascal's Triangle, I know I enjoyed more than you did. I'd put that probably toward the top of the list. The STD Fair, even if I don't consider it a dance anymore or it's a fringe dance, that's one of my all-time favorite episodes.
A fringe dance.
Yeah.
We're going to use that.
Yeah, absolutely. The faculty Halloween party in Dia de los Muertos, that's the episode that I realized that I really liked this show. Like, that's when it sunk in for me. Green Week, out of these, probably toward the bottom of this list. But, now that I say that, like, I just remember the other stories. So, like, the dance story is probably not my favorite of them, but the Fievel with Troy and Abed having to sing to him is terrific. And I really like that pairing of Shirley and Pierce in her marketing class. I really, really like that story. Probably one of my all-time favorites as far as Pierce arcs go.
He's just genuinely the good guy in that episode. And he's still funny, but not at the cost of being a complete and total crab bag, right?
Yeah. And it's one of those things, too, even though as it's happening, we're all on Team Shirley. We're like, you're a crazy old man. None of this is going to work. And the fact that it does is really funny. And then Shirley's genuine thanks. She signs thank you to him at the end of the presentation. And it's just like this really kind of warm, heartfelt thing. And like Chevy's smiling, and it's just...
I love during that montage when he literally offers her a sandwich from the crowd while she's delivering her speech.
Yeah. So, really strong B and C stories in that, even if the A wasn't quite my favorite. And then how it all comes together in song, of course, is just spectacular. So I've danced around the question. Danced around. See what I did there?
Fringe danced.
Yeah, I fringe danced it. Yeah, definitely. Night Under the Stars is... all of these are good. Every one of these is good. If I had to pick maybe a top tier, I'm going to tell you the Transfer Formal in Green Week, followed very closely by the STD Fair. That's my top half. And the other ones are all good as well, but maybe just not quite.
So I'm going to do a similar thing that you did, and I'm going to praise the episode that didn't make my top 5, which is Intro to Statistics. I think out of this group of episodes, I wouldn't say that it's my favorite, but I would say that it's the most iconic. It had the longest lasting effect. I think even people who are getting into Community, for the first time, or on levels, not like us, where we're picking apart every single episode. I think everyone knows that episode, and more than that, remembers it. So I think out of this group, it does kind of stand out just in terms of what it meant to the whole series. Now, that being said, how much I love me some Vaughn. I do love A Night Under the Stars. I think that Green Week has the best ending out of all these. I would put that, that montage up against pretty much any moment from the show. Even the emotional moments, or maybe even especially the emotional moments. I think the Trendy Dance gets the credit it deserves, but as you've mentioned, I think that episode on the whole is kind of season 1 Community at its worst. Like, they spent the whole season not being the anti-sitcom, and then just fell into these really lazy sitcom tropes in the last episode.
But then they blow it up because you think it's a love triangle and it's a quadrilateral.
Yeah, so we continue to disagree about this episode. But that being said, I do think that it's appropriately known and rated and categorized here. So for me, and this is somewhat surprising, I'm going to actually go with the Valentine's Day dance. I'm sorry, that's Communication Studies. Communication Studies, Valentine's Day dance. And, this is an episode I haven't rewatched a lot. I know during our bracket, it went down fairly early. And one of the things I remember you saying about that episode, I think more than once, because we had a rehash episode too, was you don't like people acting drunk, unless they're really good at it.
Correct.
And it's just something that rarely happens when I'm watching the show, but I took that comment and kind of just put it into my own brain without having thought it for myself. And I was rewatching season 1, because it's awesome, and also to build up for this episode. And I was just struck by how much I didn't remember how much I liked that episode. Like, I had kind of just written it off in my brain because of that. And when you're going through every episode of the show, it's easy to latch on to like one or two things from an episode that disqualify it or make it exceptional.
Sure.
I really don't mind that part of the episode whatsoever. I don't think it's obnoxious. I don't think they're trying too hard. I think it's all pretty much contained to that one montage, which is fairly short and enjoyable. But the thing that really gets me with this episode, throughout the series, at various points, some to most of the study group have their heart in the right place, right? Usually not all of them at the same time, and usually, despite having their heart in the right place, it always unravels for them, right? Because it's funny, it's a comedy.
Right.
It would be a boring show if that didn't happen most of the time. But in this episode, it just blows me away how everyone is just being a really great, selfless person, and it doesn't blow up for all of them. Like, Abed completely sacrifices who he is because that's what Jeff needs, because that's what the group needs. Jeff goes way out of character.
Yeah.
Way out of character to actually make himself vulnerable for someone else. And at this point, he's not actively trying to get in Britta's pants. Like, he's legitimately doing this because their friendship has meaning and it has evolved into a real friendship, right? So, you take those, and then even Britta, before the episode is over, when she has all of the leverage.
Yep.
She's got, she's played Jeff, she's got all the evidence, she has dolled herself up in a way I don't think Britta ever does in the show. It's kind of uncomfortable for me, but nevertheless, that's a moment for Britta. She's on top of the world, right?
Yeah.
And what she does with that power is she plays the short segment of the voicemail to Slater that makes Jeff look like a great guy.
Yeah.
And, just this whole episode, I keep waiting for, revenge or for people's best interest to unravel. And, maybe people don't like the episode because it's boring and really happy, but I don't think it's overt. I don't think it bashes you over the head with it. And I was more than a little ashamed of myself for either not realizing that before or, even worse, having forgot that. So I definitely wanted to make sure to hash that out today as we were talking about.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you did, because as I mentioned earlier, how much I love Britta as a character in season 1. That's absolutely one of the highlights of her character in the whole run of this show, is playing that for Slater, defending Jeff. It's just so great because, and again, the first time you watch it, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what she's going to do, but it's a really great, again, if we were to reclaim the term Brita, and instead of meaning to make a small, understandable mistake, it could mean something, really altruistic and heartfelt like that. In a season one context, I think we could redefine the term Brita for season one in that way.
So I don't know. I'll take that over Pascal's any day, but you would be very hard pressed to get me to say those two episodes aren't the strongest cases for dances that are made in season one.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had no idea that this rabbit hole was going to be what it was. I have got 10 or 12 episodes written on my whiteboard. I think we did a pretty good job narrowing it down.
Yeah. When you and I had initially talked about it, we had a totally different interpretation of what the dean meant when he said all 5 dances. I looked at it as, since it's the end of season one, the end of the first year, like he was saying that this was the 5th dance. Transform was the 5th dance, and if you went to it, you got a free shirt. But you had to also go to these other ones. And from my understanding, you thought of it differently when you heard that line, or had a different interpretation.
Not necessarily. When I first remembered it, I actually thought it was more of a joke, kind of a throwaway joke than anything else.
Yeah.
But then I did also consider it from the perspective of going forward. Like, okay, now that the dean has made it out there, now he's letting everyone know, hey, the people who made it to all 5 dances this year get this cool swag. Maybe they're setting it up for season 2, so these guys know ahead of time so they can make sure they get to all 5 dances.
Well, and in season 2, I think it's season 2, he mentions specifically that he throws 5 dances a year. That's in the documentary filmmaking redo, I think, when he's talking about So
it's something that, became an ongoing joke throughout the series, but, when I heard it, I did think there were, 5 obvious, well-flagged dances. And it wasn't until going back to look at them that I was like, oh, whether this was some throwaway joke or not, there's actually a ridiculous amount of dance-like activity in almost every episode of this season.
Right.
Where do we draw the lines?
Well, and sorry, you said you had 12 episodes written down. Did you have some other far-flung ones that we didn't get to?
10 to 12. A few I had crossed off before we sat down.
Yeah, just...
there is one more I wanted to mention.
Yeah.
I can't believe I almost forgot this. I'm so ashamed of myself. This was the one thing I was really excited about. Well, that's not true. I was excited about a lot of this, but...
You're excited.
When, at some point during our discussions about how we were going to let this play out, you had mentioned, once we realized that it was broader than the original scope, I might have thought, you had said something else about, or even dances that were mentioned. Well,
yes.
In Modern Warfare... there is a spring fling dance that is advertised.
Mm-hmm.
There are banners that repeatedly throughout the show, throughout the episode, there are banners for the spring fling that they don't specifically say, but apparently was supposed to be happening, but instead, paintball destroyed the school. So repeatedly throughout this episode, there's destroyed spring fling banners and spring fling banners on the ground with paintball on them. So I would contend that in season 1, there was perhaps supposed to be a spring fling dance that either had to be postponed or never came to fruition because of how things unraveled during paintball.
That's impressive. That's excellent detail work. I have a similar one for a future episode, but I don't want to get into it now. I'm going to tease it for when we do subsequent dance episodes.
Yeah, we've definitely proven the case that this is not a topic to be constrained to one episode, although I do think we did a pretty good job of getting through season 1 and kind of setting the stage for future dance discussions.
Yeah, we've got to pat ourselves on the back because no one else can physically do that right now.
Is that a humble brag?
It's an explanabrag.
Oh, okay. Well, all good things come from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that does it for now on all 5 dances. Is there anything else you'd like to throw in here, Adam, before we pull the curtain?
I don't think so. I think that is pretty comprehensive. And again, if Reddit hadn't figured this out definitively already, we're out here doing the Lord's work, just trying to make sure people know what 5 dances were which.
And please, if we missed anything or if we were wrong, don't hesitate.
Start your own podcast.
I was going to say don't hesitate to let us know on Twitter, but of course, sure. The more community podcasts, the better, right? Who doesn't love talking about and listening to community chat? So that does it for this episode of Apartment 303. As always, Apartment 303 can be found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you guys get your podcasts. We will be coming at you guys with another episode here in a few weeks. In the meantime, for Adam, this is Dave signing off. We will see you in the next episode of Apartment 303.